Hello everyone and welcome to Lab 2, where we're going to be making an enterprise-grade distributed system composed of multiple services. We're going to make a job application form, which you can fill out and store job applications. This is going to be a distributed system composed of an API, a front end, and a database. For our API, we're going to use Fast API, and for our database, we're going to use Couchbase. Our first step is to scaffold out all the required services. If you remember from the previous lab, we just needed a front end. But now we're going to be scaffolding, like I said, 3 different services. Before we scaffold out any services, we're going to set up our project structure. Previously, our app was pretty straightforward and had just a front end, but now because we're going to have multiple services interacting with one another, it's necessary to load the suitable or the required Bluetext structure. So we're going to go down to Setup Project Structure tool, select Python as our language, and leave the second parameter as blank. Then select Run Tool. In our File Explorer, by the way, if this is not open by default, you can just click on the very top right button, which opens the File Explorer. You will see that we have directories like clients, config, models, and services. We now have the clients, config, models, and services directory set out. So for example, when we add a new service, it'll go in the services directory. And when we add a new client, for example, the client for Couchbase, it will go in the clients directory. We can then move on to scaffolding our required tools. First, let's go for the API. From the drop-down, just like we did with the front end, select API and name it. I'm going to name mine just API. Then press Run Tool. Now we can see that we have our API running in the services section, but there's no need to click and navigate to it there like we did in the previous lab. Let's repeat these steps for the front end and for Couchbase. So we're going to select front end from the drop-down, name it front end, and select Run Tool. Now you can see we have 2 different services running. My steps window got a bit big, so the services window got minimized, but you can easily expand that, like we mentioned in the previous step, by navigating around the Polytope TUI with your arrow keys. And finally, for Couchbase, we're going to select Couchbase from the template and name it Couchbase. You can also name it whatever, just make sure that it's one word. Now, as you can see, we have 3 different services running. We're now going to run the add client tool for Couchbase. This adds the Couchbase client to the clients directory that we scaffolded out with our first step that we ran. This tool also adds values and secrets that are used when we set up the environment variables required to connect to the client. We're going to select Couchbase and press Run Tool. As you can see, now in our clients directory under Python, because of course we've generated the project structure with the Python parameter, you can see that the Couchbase client is set up. We're now going to set up the API to be able to interact with the client. We're going to select API for the service and Couchbase for the client. This adds the environment variables to connect to the client for the service, and we'll use the values that we set in the earlier step. Of course, we can now press Run Tool. Now, we can click anywhere in the Polytope TUI and close Polytope. Once you click on Polytope, you can press Ctrl+C and you'll be prompted with, the following sandbox will be shut down. You can select Enter to quit it. Then you can just press Start Developing, which will reload our stack. And we will see all 3 services that we previously had running are running. The reason why we are doing this is so that Polytope can pick up on the environment variables that we set. For this, as it stands right now, a restart of the stack is required. We're now going to add an entity, which will also create a Couchbase collection. We'll select Couchbase for the client, Python for the language, and input the single and plural name of our collection. We're going to name it application, so of course the plural is applications. Then we're going to select Run Tool. We set our last parameter blank, so by default it scaffolds out the application entity in the private directory. We're now going to set up client and start prompting just like we did before. We're going to go into the small MCP configuration settings icon at the very bottom and press retry connection. You'll see something like this. Then we're going to start prompting. Our first prompt is we're going to start working on a job application web app. The first step is to create fields for a typical job application. These are the different strings and links that you'll be uploading as part of your job application. So the fields could include name, age, past experience, and years of previous experience. When that is done, we can look back at the application's entity and see the fields that it created. These include first name, last name, email, phone, resume, URL, cover letter, etc. For our next prompt, we said, create an operation that allows me as a user to create a job application. As you can see, it's created this in the operations directory. I've then said, create endpoints for the API so that we can expose this operation to other services. We can wait for that to finish, and you'll see your coding agent will probably try testing the API endpoints once it tries to create them. And finally, we're going to have a prompt for the front end. Our front end prompt says, create a front end for our app that we can fill out applications and store them in the Couchbase collection applications that we have created fields for. This is what my front end looks like. Depending on your prompt and depending on the client's output, you might get something different. You could also prompt it to create a more flashy UI or make it green or blue. We can then go into the Couchbase UI, which is the very first port visible under services. So the first one is the output of the test that client made. If you remember, I showed very briefly in one of the previous slides. And the second one is my actual submission. So as you can see here in JSON format, there's all the different information that I uploaded as part of my job application. The resume URL required a link, so I just pasted my most recent Netflix link because I didn't want to go through and find my old resume. But yeah. So now, with everything that you've learned from this, we encourage you to start the third lab, which is essentially a playground. We encourage you to make any enterprise grade system of your own using a database, an API, and a front end.